This video is intended for those who buy a Willowtrail Fell Pony Weanling from me and want to continue the type of handling that the ponies had from me from its birth during its transition to its new life. I've been handling Fell Pony foals and weanlings for more than 20 years, so I share what has worked well for me and enabled the ponies I have bred and sold, as well as those I've kept, to go on to happy and productive lives. The video starts with me approaching Willowtrail Rory, a 6-month-old gelding. I then halter him, lead him, ask him to move his quarters, and then handle his feet. So often, when people approach a pony, they think the pony is presenting the face to be petted. In reality, the pony is looking and smelling and listening. However, they can't see right between their eyes. They have a blind spot there. So when people go to pet a pony's face, the pony may react by pulling back. A true pony partner, then, will approach with that in mind. Here you'll see me approach and offer my hand for sniffing, then we'll exchange air. Then I will stroke his neck and scratch the point of his shoulder and then his withers. I almost never pet a pony's face. When I approach and offer my hand for sniffing, I am looking for the pony's reaction. Here you'll see that Rory expresses interest by looking toward my hand and pricking his ears, so I proceed with exchanging air and the rest. However, if the pony were to look away or pin its ears, I would want to back off and try again, hopefully figuring out along the way why the pony wasn't interested in engaging. Often here it's because another pony has invaded our space. When I put the halter on Rory, you'll see that he starts to move. I reach down to scratch his point of shoulder to ask him to stand still. One of the earliest lessons my ponies learn is to stop and stand still when they're being scratched. Here Rory follows me well once I start leading him, but not so many days ago that wasn't the case. The lead rope would tighten between us and he would stand there not moving. In that case, I don't want to reward that refusal, so I keep the tension on until he gives the slightest try at moving toward me. If he starts to back away, I go with him if necessary, but always keep the tension on the rope so he knows that backwards isn't what I want. If he doesn't show any try to move forward, then I will keep the tension on but move to one side, and usually then he will move a foot in my direction. I immediately release the tension in the rope as a reward, then start over again. In time, weanlings learn to move off with us, as Rory does here, and keep moving, but they're still young, so refusals may still happen. Keep the tension on, and then reward the slightest try by releasing it immediately. Here, since he led off nicely, I stopped after a few moments and rewarded him for following me by stopping and scratching the point of his shoulder, telling him he is a good boy. Here is another session showing me approaching Rory. I have the halter out where he can see it, so he knows what the plan is. I like to be honest with my ponies, not hiding the halter, because they're always honest with me. I stop partway to Rory to acknowledge that he turned his head to look at me. Then I scratch his withers in greeting. But then I don't put the halter on. Instead, I back away, inviting him to come with me. If he does, it shows me his level of willingness to work together. When he starts moving toward me, I keep backing away to encourage more of that movement toward me until I'm sure he'll come all the way to be haltered. An important skill in leading is backing, and it's one of the first skills I teach a foal before they've even accepted a halter. I teach it before I teach leading because it's so useful. When a foal is ready to start learning from me, I cut my hand over the lower nose and apply pressure toward the tail, usually also using the word back. Once the halter is introduced, I apply pressure down and backward to ask for back. I apply the pressure gently at first and slowly increase. Sometimes it's necessary to rock the rope halter side to side while maintaining the pressure in order to get movement. As soon as I get a backward try, whether it's shifting weight or one foot stepping back, I release the pressure, rewarding the effort, including with a scratch on the point of the shoulder. The goal is to get a step back immediately as soon as the pressure on the halter is applied. Once I'm sure the pony understands that pressure means back, then I will try for multiple backward steps with pressure applied and released with each step. Subtle use of that pressure can be used to reposition the feet rather than complete backward movement, as you'll see later. Some ponies go backward in a straight line naturally, and some have curves in their backward movement. At the beginning, backward movement of any type is all I'm looking for. As our partnership matures, I can get more precise about backing straight. Now let's talk about moving the quarters. By quarters, I mean the hind end and the front end. I'm pretty particular about how these should move when working on the ground because we want them to move in certain ways when ridden. From the time my foals are born, I start touching them all over, but I never touch them inside the green box on this photo. This is where a rider's leg will be, and leg aids will be given here. I want the ponies to retain their sensitivity to touch in this area, not become dull to it. When I start working on them moving their quarters, which comes after they've accepted a halter, sometimes as early as a week old, I use the spaces in the red circles for cueing. Pressure inside the rear red circle signals moving the hind end away, and pressure inside the forward red circle signals moving the front end away. When we start, usually they need support on the halter to discourage movement anywhere but in the quarter I'm focused on, or to encourage movement in the direction we're heading. And when we start, I'll accept any movement. But as we get more advanced in our work together, I get more particular. Eventually, I want the nearest hind leg to step under the body, crossing the other foot without the forequarters moving. In the front, I want the nearest front leg to step across the other front foot without the hindquarters moving. I apologize for not getting all of Rory's body in this portion of the video, one of the hazards of working solo, I'm afraid. You will also notice that Rory takes the lead rope in his mouth in this portion. I have found this is very common in young ponies, some more so than others. I've also learned that the easiest way to get the rope out of the mouth is to not pull on it, because that causes the pony to clamp its jaw shut tighter. Instead, work the rope further into the mouth somehow, which encourages them to open their mouth and release the rope, as you see me do here. As you watch this section on moving the quarters, you'll also see that I make copious use of scratches in favorite places as rewards. For instance, the point of the shoulder or the withers. You'll also notice that before applying pressure in the red circles, I rub the area lightly to notify Rory that I'm about to ask for something. Here I'm about to ask Rory to move his forequarters away from me. I rub in the red circle, then apply pressure. I have my other hand with the lead rope near his head to encourage movement away from me. After he moves, I rub him in thanks. The goal is to eventually get the movement just from the slightest pressure in the red circle, with no support from the other hand on the lead rope. And of course, another goal is to apply light pressure between the two red circles and get movement of both quarters away at the same time. But that comes later. Here I'm about to ask Rory to move his hindquarters away from me. I rub the red circle, then apply pressure, increasing the pressure until I get movement. It's far from ideal movement, but at least I got movement and not no response. Notice that I then take up the slack in the lead rope before asking again to control his front end. Then, when I apply pressure, I get movement only in the hindquarters. Here I'm about to ask Rory to move his forequarters again. I ask and get movement, and ask again and again until I get the step across that I'm looking for instead of a step forward. Then I reward him with scratches on his withers. Then I end this section of training with a bigger scratch in a favorite place between his front legs down his center bottom line. Here is a different, shorter session where I'm working with Rory on moving his hindquarters. You can see his foot placement easier in this one. Now it's time to work on foot handling. Foot handling starts here as soon after 2 days of age as the foal shows interest in engaging. It is all done at liberty then, and here I'm working with Rory at 6 months old at liberty too, meaning not tied or with someone holding the lead rope. My goal is for a pony's first foot trim to be done at liberty. That way I know they have learned to stand still and to cooperate in the whole endeavor. I began with a stroke on the neck, then stroke down the leg, letting Rory know what we're about to do, since this is always how I have started. Sometimes a pony will lift their foot before I even give the signal to do so because they recognize this pattern. My signal is to tap their hoof with my fingers. Some people like to squeeze the chestnut or the tendons on the back of the leg, and many farriers assume this is what the pony has been taught. I prefer the tap on their hoof as a first signal because it is indicating a level of cooperation rather than a response to discomfort. So I stroke down the leg, tap the hoof, and then if the pony hasn't picked up their foot, I pick it up using the feather as a handle. As a pony gets older and has been through this process many times so they understand what's expected of them, they become much more willing to pick their foot up on their own, which of course is the goal. Once I have their hoof in my hands, I immediately put it back down as a reward for cooperation so far, also giving a scratch on the point of the shoulder or buttock, depending on whether I'm working on the front or back feet. I have found that it's as important, if not more important, to teach a pony to put their foot down politely as it is to pick it up. If a pony yanks their foot out of my hand when I'm working and puts it down quickly, it indicates a lack of cooperation, and I have clearly missed something important. Sometimes it's something in the environment, and sometimes it's something in our relationship. Clearly, if it's the latter, I need to be paying better attention. You will see that Rory wants to nibble on my back while I'm working on his leg and foot. At this stage of his training, I'm very mindful what I am training for in the moment and what needs correction. I am training for proper foot handling, so I don't want to discipline the nibbling in case he would confuse the reprimand for footwork rather than the nibbling. So I use a gentle blocking motion to discourage him from nibbling. Rory also decides to move his feet from the position I had him in. Before I continue working on his hoof, I put him back to where he was, another opportunity to practice moving the quarters. When he has been cooperative and let me complete my work on his foot, I give him a belly rub as a more significant reward than the smaller scratches I have given him along the way. As I'm working with Rory, another thing you'll see me do is make sure Rory is standing square before I attempt to handle his feet. If I want him to stand still when I lift one foot off the ground, I need to set him up for success. So I make sure he has his weight evenly distributed on all 4 feet before asking him to give me one of them. If he's not stood square, then when he shifts his weight in response to me lifting a foot, he may feel the need to move to rebalance himself. Since I want him to be still, I need to do what I can to help him do that for me. You see me picking Rory's feet, then pulling his foot down and then forward. This imitates what a farrier will do when rasping the hoof from the top down. Foals have told me that having their foot pulled forward is a completely different experience than having it lifted underneath them, so I have learned I need to accustom them to this maneuver. You will also notice that I'm not consistent with where I scratch as an interim reward. Sometimes I scratch on the withers rather than the point of shoulder or buttock. The important thing is a small interim reward for cooperation. In conclusion, what I am working on with Rory right now is different than what I would work with him on in a few months from now, or what I worked with him on a few months ago. Our partnership evolves over time as we learn new skills we can perform together. What I do with my adult ponies is different than what I do with my youngsters, but the communication patterns that I established when they were Rory's age will serve us well for the duration of our time together. I expect the same will be true for future owners of each of my ponies, including Rory.